serious cuts could be in store for millions of Medicare Advantage patients. The Obama administration calling for a reduction in spending that could amount to as much as 3.5% by next year. John Fund is a columnist for National Review magazine, joins us now. John, really great to see you, and I wonder what you think about how big of an issue this will be in the midterm elections in November. Republicans jumping all over it.
Well, and Democrats. I mean, Senator Chuck Schumer and 6 Democrats who are up for election in 2014 have written a letter to the president saying, please don't make these Medicare cuts. It's a surprise to a lot of seniors. 30% of seniors, Ed, belong to Medicare Advantage. That's a program that is privately managed Medicare. It offers often benefits that traditional Medicare doesn't, like vision and dental and gym memberships and chronic illness treatment. And 90% of people on Medicare Advantage say they like the program. But that's the one part of Medicare that's going to be cut, and the money is apparently going to be transferred to Obamacare to try to help people sign up for the, uninsured. And it's basically a shell game to a lot of people looking at this because they're happy with their Medicare Advantage plan, and once again, they're not going to be able to keep it as they envisioned it.
Now, you raise a good point, because while Republicans have been up in arms about this, you're right, there are a lot of Democrats, not just Chuck Schumer, but some Democrats up for re-election in November in the Senate particularly, are worried about losing control of the Senate, and have now circulated a letter to the president saying, don't do this. Are Democrats in the Senate on the spot, not just to push back on these cuts, but maybe support legislation that would come up with changes, broader changes, maybe delays on the individual mandate or something like that to the president's health care law, because they're getting beaten up back home over this law?
Ed, I'm astonished that you think that something in Obamacare could be delayed. That would never happen.
We've only seen it a couple dozen times or so.
Look, these Medicare cuts were supposed to happen 2 years ago, and then they came up with this demonstration project, and they poured money in to basically delay the cuts. So now the cuts are finally coming due, and they should have taken place in 2012. It wouldn't surprise me at all, Ed, that you're right, that somehow money or something will be found on an executive order to delay these cuts until after the 2014 election, which of course Democrats are worried that the Senate is at stake in.
But John, we also got to point out, you're a conservative analyst. What do you think about the fact that Republicans on the Hill talk a lot about cutting the nation's debt? Then, there were cuts to veterans' benefits in that budget deal at the end of last year. They got squeamish about it, and both sides had to give in and go back on those spending cuts. Now we've heard a long time Republicans on the Hill saying we need entitlement reform. Why isn't the president doing more on entitlement reform? Why isn't he cutting the deficit and the debt? Here are some Medicare cuts, and Republicans and Democratic senators say, no, don't do this. We got to cut somewhere.
Well, Ed, you're right. They're hypocrites in both parties. A lot of Republicans are hypocrites. They talk the talk on entitlement reform, and they don't deliver. But look, the president could have had permanent entitlement reform proposals, like, for example, over time, like we did with Social Security in the 80s, extending the age at which you qualify for Medicare from 65 to 67. That would be a permanent fix. The president has always avoided those kind of permanent reforms. Instead, he's gone for quick fixes, like cutting Medicare Advantage, which is a program he doesn't like because it's private sector medicine managing it.
John, help me understand as well, when we talk about entitlement reform, Social Security future benefit cuts had been on the table in the president's budget last year. We learned in the last 48 hours they're not going to be in there now. Now, the White House says that's because the president put those painful cuts for Democrats on the table. Republicans wouldn't put tax hikes on the table. That's their side of the story. Does this mean, though, that the president has basically given up in his final 3 years in office on major entitlement reform?
No, I think the president believes that he can get something in behalf of his agenda, and that would be tax increases. So he's waiting to get a tax increase deal. Of course, just a few months ago, I think he got a deal which included tax increases, but now he's back at the table. Both sides are positioning themselves for a long, drawn-out siege. I don't see anything happening until the stalemate, frankly, is broken by either a Republican Senate and House forcing things onto the president's desk, forcing him to make painful vetoes, or the 2016 presidential election, when we're going to get a new president of one party or the other.
Sounds like both sides stuck in place at least until after the midterms, and we sort out who's really in power. John Fund, thanks for coming in.